Hi everyone, it's Samira. Welcome. We are here again for This is How We Heal Trauma, a Hillman Taught course. I'm so happy that you're here. Let me know when you hop on, where you're from, how your day is going. If you're on the replay, hashtag replay. I'm still recording in two different places, so if you see my eyes going every which way, that's what I'm doing. And let's get into it. Today is a good day. We are talking about trauma and the body. We're also talking about how to create more safety in the body. I'm going to go over a bit how trauma gets stored in our body, the impact it makes, and how to undo some of that. And so we'll just drop in for a moment and join um, in the present moment. Get comfortable right where you are. Whatever works best for you is perfect. If you want to close your eyes, you can. If you want to lower your gaze, that's perfect. You might just take some mindful breaths and just notice what's here for you today. So much of dropping in um, or meditation really is just allowing ourselves to be present in the present moment with whatever is here. Whatever is here is welcome. Emotions, feelings, just focus on your breath. Just focus on your breath. And as you inhale, you're going to breathe in love. And as you exhale, you're going to breathe out stress, anything that's ready to go. Hi, love. And as you notice, just feel your body wherever you are, in your chair, on your sofa, on your yoga mat, in your office, if you're in the car for this. Um, don't close your eyes, of course, but just notice how whatever is beneath you is supporting you. And you don't have to think about it supporting you, you just know that it is supporting you. It's supporting you, and there's nothing that you have to do about it, right? You don't have to control it. You're just noticing that you are supported. And the more that we can notice when life is supporting us, the more that we can naturally anchor into our body being here now. We can grow our capacity to feel what's in the here and now. And we're able to do so with less judgment, right? So just notice in this moment if you can tap into any part of your body or your experience that feels safe. It might be in your toes, it might be in your hands, it might be a feeling that you have, it might be the blanket that you have right now. Whatever helps you feel safe in this moment, can you just bring some acknowledgement to it? And sometimes when it's hard for me to tap in to safety, I tap into gratitude. And that can be um, like a plan B. Sometimes, if there's a lot of stress or we're just feeling unsafe, it can feel challenging to tap into safety. And we're going to work on some ways to help you do that. And you can always tap into something that you're choosing to be grateful for, even if the situation is still challenging, right? And so, as you just accept whatever is here, and as you tap into a moment of safety, if you're able to, or gratitude, let's just offer some gratitude and peace and anchoring for you, for your courage in showing up today. And let's ripple that out to the entire world. The love, the safety, the noticing, the slowing down. So much of healing trauma has to do with simply giving ourselves permission to slow down our thinking, our breathing, our doing, our busyness, our beingness. And as you begin to slow it all down, just for a moment, just for today, you might give yourself a hug. You might hold your own hand. And as you gently breathe in back to this moment, you might wiggle your fingers and toes. You might move your body in any way that feels good to you. You might sway or rock. You might notice what's around you, the color on the wall, the light fixture, something on your bed in your office, just to ground yourself back into the here and now. And as you come back, we're going to move into talking about the role that trauma plays, right, in with our body. So we often think that trauma is the thing that happens to us. And though that is true, it is the thing that happens to us. It's also the thing that is happening in our body. It's the impact of trauma that we most struggle with, right? If we survive the thing that we think is going to kill us, if we actually survive it, and many of us do, right? Thankfully, we're on the other side of the event, right? However, our bodies oftentimes freeze in time. And what we know about trauma is that it is so much more genetic based and epigenetic based, meaning there's trauma in our DNA from previous generations, right? We've had these just horrific situations happen in our society, right? You have slavery, you have the Holocaust, Great Depression, these things that changed a generation of people forever. That data, right? That genetic data is passed down through our bloodlines. And so when we talk about books like The Body Keeps Score or My Grandmother's Hands, it's a phenomenal book. We really are thinking about trauma being stored in our body as memory. And the memory is not always a cognitive memory. Most of the time, it's not. Trauma really communicates in symptoms, in feelings, in reactions, right? So when we have these experiences going on in our body and in our mind, right, we often don't think about it as information, but it is. The symptoms, the reactions, your experiences are really messengers. They're messengers of the past trying to communicate something to you today, right? But it can be challenging to understand the language of the nervous system when we don't feel as though we have just the information that we're needing. And so we're going to go over some of that today in terms of when you have certain symptoms. Many of you have heard about fight and flight, freeze and fawn. It is definitely a trauma response, right? We also have analysis paralysis. We also have overthinking is another one that we really go into a lot. And when this is coming up for you, what can be really helpful is to remember that you can pause in any moment. You can stop, drop, and pause. You can feel how you feel. And the moment between feeling how you feel and reacting, there's a sacred pause there that happens. And the more that you do it, the more that you cultivate it. And this can be with anything, right? With our own self, with our responses, with our children, with work, with partners, right? With someone at the grocery store. There are lots of times throughout the day, the week to respond to things. There's also lots of times to react. And when we are reacting, we are almost always reacting from this place of past memory, past experience, past trigger, right? You can always tell when trauma is involved when the person's response or reaction is so much more intense than the situation really calls for, right? It's always a sign that whatever the person is going through is not just about what's happening in the here and now. And so it's also a sign for us to be aware that whenever we're feeling big feelings about something, if we can just get curious about what actually is coming up for me, you can get a piece of paper and just journal out, right? You can use it in your phone, in your notes app, you can email yourself, but being able to process what's really the challenge here for me. Why am I so pissed off? Why am I so hurt? Why does this feel so painful? And then just allow yourself to write whatever comes up. Your subconscious mind, your inner child will communicate with you through the writing. If you want to really tap into your inner child, and we'll go more into this in that section, you can use your non-dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, you would use your left hand to write with, and your inner child will come out and be able to communicate with you that way. And if you want to be really mindful of the way that the mind and the body are really interacting, it's very true that in a lot of ways, the mind can be a mirror of the body and the body can be a mirror of the mind, meaning they're so connected that when we are having challenges with one, we're going to feel it with the other. So if we are having a lot of mental and emotional challenges, we're going to have physical responses and reactions and symptoms that really mirror that challenge that we're having mentally, right? If we're having body challenges and symptoms, it's going to put a stress and a strain on our mental capacity, on our emotional capacity. And oftentimes, when trauma has happened when we are very young, when we are children, before we learn to talk, right? So when we're pre-verbal, a lot of the work I do is helping people who've had early trauma. And so developmental trauma is very disruptive because a child's neural pathways are still forming in the brain. And when trauma happens, the pathway that gets formed is a traumatic pathway, a traumatic response, a traumatic narrative of like, this is the way the world works, but it's getting programmed as like, this is normal, or this is like the way life is. And so as we get older and we get more emotional resources, when we get more support often, we are able to go back and reprogram these neural pathways that were created in trauma, in dysfunction often, right? And just need some unraveling so that we can really show up in our adult energy, having control over how we're wanting to live and how we're wanting to be in the world, not just working on autopilot of the things that happened in the past. And so when our body is really, when it has trauma that's stuck, we're always typically going to feel it with mental strain, right? And physical strain. So this can look like physical symptoms of pain, of numbness, of feeling disconnected from your body, of headaches. A lot of trauma survivors deal with migraine headaches. A lot of trauma survivors have a high tolerance for pain, but because the neurotransmitters are impacted by trauma, it's like we can feel pain more intensely because trauma impacts our brainstem, and all of this holds information. And so often when we resolve imprints of the past, traumatic experiences, when we unravel some of that, when we resolve some of that, we experience more relief of symptoms. Some symptoms dissolve, right, over time. Some don't completely, but often they improve significantly. And so when you think about that in terms of what can you do to support yourself with this process, it's like, think about it in terms of, if you were having a challenging time with anything, how would you support yourself to move through it in a way that honored your mind and your body and your spirit, really, right? Oftentimes, this means the bare minimum, like foundational things, being mindful of caring for yourself, eating as well as you can, right? Or making sure that you are just eating something, hydrating. Maybe it's water, maybe it's not water, but some hydration, right? It's doing the basic things to help yourself feel supported and cared for. This is how you're creating more capacity in the nervous system to move through whatever challenging thing that your body and your system is trying to move through. So it sounds very basic, it sounds very elementary, but it is still the building blocks, right? Self care is the building blocks of creating more internal resources to help us navigate our emotional inner landscape. It can help us to have more bandwidth to then look at some of the patterns and symptoms that we're trying to resolve, right? But self care, soul care is what I call it, because it really is like medicine for your soul. It really starts from you pouring into you in some way. In some way, use what you have where you are as best you can, and you will notice a difference. So, as we support our body and our mind for moving through trauma, it's so important to remember that we cannot force trauma to resolve itself. We cannot force it to disappear. We cannot force it to unravel when it's not ready to. We also can't force, oftentimes, information to come if it's not ready, right? We also can try our best, but it's also hard to suppress information that is wanting to come up. The more that we hold it down, the more symptoms that we're typically going to feel that are going to be not so great. So when we think about allowing whatever's here to be here, you really are taking control back over your own experience. And as painful as this can be, as painful as it can be to face challenging things, yes, we can do hard things, but it doesn't mean that they're not still hard. It doesn't mean that they're not still painful. And it doesn't mean that they're not still very, very challenging. To do that, you must commit to being gentle with yourself. Being gentle with yourself is not letting yourself off the hook for every little thing. It's not doing the work. But gentleness, in this respect, means whatever your body or your mind has suppressed or been not ready to deal with for a very long time, if it is coming up, it's coming up for a reason. We may not know what the reason is, and that's okay. And it's important for us to be gentle with ourselves. If we're having a lot of physical symptoms and we can't explain them, doctors can't figure it out, oftentimes there is immune damage that happens when we experience trauma, especially at an early age. We do lose oxygen to the brain. A lot of post-traumatic stress disorder and complex PTSD really centers around there being a traumatic brain injury. And so much of the care and the treatment and the recovery is about supporting our brain and really using neuroscience to help shift neural pathways, to help promote healing of the vagus nerve, of all of our nervous systems. We have more than one and they work together. And so it sounds very elementary, but it is the exact thing that's needed. Care and more care. slowing down, caring for yourself, mind, body, and spirit, decreasing stress as best you can for where you are in your life. Sometimes it's not going to look the same if you've got little kids, or if you've got very little support, or if you just have a lot of energy that's going out every day. You may simply need to create 2 or 3 or 5 minutes, right? Like a pocket of peace, a pocket of care that you can listen to a meditation or simply breathe. We're going to walk through a breathing exercise today before we end, but bringing in nourishment to yourself, to your soul, getting out and doing something that you enjoy, right? Um, Doing anything that creates some peace and some calm in your nervous system is a healing approach, right? It doesn't have to be super fancy, super time consuming, super expensive. Walks are so underrated, right? Walking can be so healing. I know it's very cold in a lot of the places right now. I get that, but you can do a few laps in your home, right? If you're able to do that. I've done it plenty of times. You can just pace up and down your hallway. It does the same thing. Is being in nature great when we can be? It is. And it's always going to be best to do something in nature. But we work with what we have where we are, and we make the best of it. And so I would love to hear what is coming up for you. What is supportive? How is your own process with body and mind um, being connected? Do you have experience with it? Are you aware of it? Have you learned something new today? I'd love to know. I would also love to know what you do to support your body. And if you are having some of these symptoms, um, I'd love to know, like, what nervous system things do you do to support either the physical symptoms or the mental symptoms. The smallest things really help so much. And we often think that we have to do fancy things. We don't. The smallest things help so much. The eating um, as best we can, right? Hydrating, moving our body, getting fresh air, doing a little journaling, right? Reading something that inspires you or that quiets your mind, coloring, right? Spending time with someone you care about without phones, right? Without being so distracted. If your brain helps, if it helps your brain to watch something that you enjoy so your brain can turn off for a little bit, that also can be amazing. That's amazing. I'm so happy for you. Someone on Instagram is sharing. Yes, small steps, small wins. If there's something that you're allergic to or that you know your body doesn't like, doing your best to step down from it, right? Doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be cutting back. And it's such a win when we're able to do it. We do not have to strive for 100% perfection. Leaning into some of these practices will give you more bandwidth and relief than you realize. And so, as we move into a bit of a body scan, I will say this. When we're talking about noticing what's coming up with our bodies, how we're feeling, what we're feeling, it's totally okay if you don't feel anything necessarily. That is fine. Sometimes we experience numbness, like emotional numbness, physical numbness when we've experienced trauma. Right now in our world, there's a lot of trauma happening, like in present day, like present real time. The same thing happened with 2020 and the pandemic. The same thing has happened really for so many things. Honestly, like 9/11 and onward, there have been so many things. And of course, there were historical things that happened before then. But what I'm saying is, we, in some ways, are most disconnected from our bodies present day. And it's okay, meaning there's nothing that you need to force. You don't need to force yourself to feel something that you don't feel. You don't need to force yourself to think if you don't feel anything that you're doing it wrong, you're not doing it wrong, you can't get it wrong. There's no way to do it wrong. You simply notice what you notice. And I encourage people, and this is what helped me so much on my own healing journey, and it's always an evolution, was to lean into modifying things for myself. So for a long time, I couldn't do, like, I didn't like doing EFT, the tapping. And so I was trying to do it like with the words and with the phrases and doing it the different rounds. And it was really just too much for me. This was years ago. But I remember thinking, like, why can't I do this? Like, what is happening? Why can't I do it? It wasn't until I realized that I could actually tap with no issue if I just tapped and didn't say anything. If I just went through the process of doing it and not saying anything, I could feel the shifts. And then I added in just like affirming statements. So I am safe, I am loved, you know, I'm focusing on the good, whatever it was. Sometimes it was simply I am safe over and over and over again. When I did it in a modified way, I was able to do it. I was able to do it more often, and I got far more value out of it. I could really feel the effect of it with my nervous system when I wasn't trying to force myself to do it this right way, that it felt very hard for me to do at the time. So I share that with you to say there may be something that you're wanting to lean into that you feel like if I could only do it the way it's laid out, then it would work. And I'm just reminding you gently that our body, our mind, our spirit, right? It's this holy trifecta. It's much more forgiving than we realize. It doesn't need things to be perfect for it to work. And it doesn't need to be the exact way that the textbook or the online thing says it has to be for it to work for you. If you're open to it working your way, I created a belief for myself that things get to be easy, they get to work with like minimum effort, and so you can create what gets to be true for you. You can do your best on any given day. And if 30% is your best today, that's you giving it all that you had. If your best is 50% today, you giving 50% is a home run. Not everything needs to be, nor should it be 100%. And that kind of thinking oftentimes is what slows down our healing process, because if we can allow ourselves to work with our body and work with our mind and work with our spirit in whatever way those aspects are needing us to in that season. Some seasons are slower, right? We have seasons for a reason. Winter, fall, spring, summer, each one has a pace, each one has a timing. You can't always do the things in summer that you would normally do in the winter time. They don't work in the same way. The weather, the temperature, the elements, all these things factor in. It's the same with our emotional landscape and our physical landscape. Trauma is very much physical. It very much has a legacy. It very much has a story. Oftentimes, it includes multiple generations. It's not just our life in the present moment. Other things are being factored in. And so we'd have to give the process some time. I share that to say the less pressure you can put on yourself to do things a certain way or for things to look a certain way, the more doable the thing is going to be. And with trauma, what is so important is to remember, if you're treating this like a traumatic brain injury, and we all should be, the brain needs rest. When my daughter got a concussion about 2 years ago, what I really realized was all of the things that we needed to do for her to support her in healing were a lot of the things that I've done and helped my clients do for years in healing trauma, slowing down, minimizing stimulation. She couldn't read, she couldn't watch TV, there were no phones, there was no exercise. It was simply like laying down for endless hours, just resting, literally resting and sleeping. resting the brain is how it heals. That's often the same with our body and with healing trauma. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't do anything, because with trauma, we do need some movement. We do need some gentleness. We do need some structure, right? But it might not look the way you want it to look right now. And it might not be as quick and sporty as we want it to be. And it's okay if it's taking a long time and you're over it. That too gets to be okay, because sometimes we have big things to heal and it can take a very long time. Now, we also have more tools and more pathways of healing that grow and expand every year. The more that we learn about neuroscience and these different processes, that speeds up the healing process. So there is hope. It's not going to take 20 years for you like it did for me. And even if it does, if you knew you couldn't get it wrong, that spirit has your back and that you can heal yourself. Healing is always possible. Could you be more open to? It takes as long as it takes. I'm going to stay the path and get free of whatever this is, right? That's holding me back. So I share that with you. We're going to jump into our body scan, and then we will talk about next steps. So get comfortable right where you are. Do this in any way that feels good for you. What's most important is just to remember that there's no way to do it wrong. And so you might simply just notice what is coming up for you. If you were to feel into your body in any way, you might place your hand on your heart or on your forehead. You might simply notice what's here. Can you bring in some curiosity? How does it feel to be in your body today? There might be aches and pains. There might be anxiety. There might be tiredness. There might be excitement. Whatever it is perfect. Even if you don't feel anything, even if there's just like a blank slate, also perfect. Be open to what you notice, because it all matters and it's all okay. And as you continue just to notice how you are feeling, notice how you're feeling in your face. What's coming up? Notice your jaw, your forehead, your eyes. Is there softness? Is there pressure? There might be some tension. It's all good and it's all okay. Move down into your shoulders and your neck. There might be tension. There might be pain. They might feel loose. Whatever it is perfect. As you allow just this soothing energy to move down into your chest and your belly, notice your breath. Is it shallow? Is it deep? Is there pain? Just be with whatever's here. There might be some tenderness and pain in your heart. If it is, it's completely okay and welcome. If there's lightness and joy, that's also perfectly okay and welcome. So you allow this energy just to move into your hips and your legs. Can you feel any heaviness? Is there lightness? There might be pain or tingling. There might simply be sensations that you can't describe, And that's also perfect. Oftentimes, it's important for us just to notice what's here without having to label it as good or bad. Just noticing what's here and being with it. As you allow the energy to move into your feet and your toes, do you feel grounded? Do you feel your feet planted on the floor or wherever they are? It can be helpful to think of our bodies as like a tree. And so we have our branches, the limbs, we have our trunk, and we can allow the roots of our tree, we can imagine them as actual roots that can unravel, right, from our root chakra, if you will. And you can imagine them going through your home, through the cement, the sediment, the earth, the dirt, the rocks, down into Mother Earth herself, and allowing your roots to ground you into the earth. And this can work as like a root system where you can release anything that you want to release through these tree roots. Pain, hurt, disappointment, resentment, stuckness, feeling lost, alone, overwhelmed. Anything can be released. And you can also call love up through this root system. Love, joy, peace, nourishment can also be summoned. So we can release and we can receive through our sacred root system. And as you breathe in, the grounding, the anchored reality of just centering in your body for a moment, connecting with yourself, your own energy system, and that of the earth. You might offer some gratitude just for this moment, for this time. And know that you can come back here anytime, even if you only have 20 or 30 seconds. You can simply notice one part of your body. You might give yourself a hug. You might do some butterfly tapping each, the opposite shoulder, crossing your arms and just tapping. You might hold your own hand and just come into alignment with your own self just for a moment and breathe. You might rock a little bit just to help soothe yourself and your soul and your energy. The more that we befriend our body and our emotions and that sacred connection, the more peace we're going to find, the more synergy we're going to find, and honestly, the more safety we're going to be able to create. Because in order to create more safety, we have to be in the here and now, right? And so when we're not in the here and now, it's hard to feel safe. So the more that we can come back to our body, back to the present moment, where our power always is, our power is always going to be in the present moment, that is where we're able to source, right, that safety, that leadership, so that we can make the choices that we need to make for ourselves, to keep ourselves safe, to help us to be able to thrive and to move forward in good ways that are honoring for ourselves, for those we care about, and for the greater good. Thank you so much for being here today. I would love to know how you're feeling with the body scan. Did it resonate? Did it not? Totally okay if it didn't. It doesn't for everybody. Some people lean into it, but it's not their favorite. I love when we can take a practice and make it our own. And so that might look like 30 seconds or 1 minute of just noticing your body a little more often. and seeing what that brings up for you, right? It's a little bit easier to drop into your body when you do it a bit more often. Maybe you do it already and you want to kick it up a notch, right? You might want to do it for a little longer, maybe in different environments. Maybe you want to take it into like your bedtime routine and make it a thing. Whatever feels nourishing for you is what I would challenge you to lean into. And even if it feels a little bit edgy, oftentimes, we are going to grow the most when we are willing to move just a little bit out of our comfort zone. We don't have to freak ourselves out, right? It doesn't have to be huge steps, but those small micro steps, baby steps, do compound, they add up. And before you know it, you'll be further along than you've realized. I love you so much. I'll see you back here tomorrow at 10:30, let's say, for our next session.